Welcome to At Home with Mr. K. During this pandemic and such, I'm stuck at home and teaching from home. And one of the projects is Skeletal Articulation. So where I gathered my information in general, this is part 2 of the series, by the way. When I started teaching, my wife was a student at the vet school. And so one of her projects was creating skeletal anatomy specimens for high schools to use. It was kind of a neat program. So she did a lot of working on leg bones of horses, jaw bones of horses and cattle and things like that, so that they could be used in the classroom. So like when I teach a large animal science or a production animal, or I should say a companion animal science class, and we're working with horses, I have jaws that we can use to tell their age and practice identifying horses by their teeth, things like that. So so we kind of got into it that way. Most of this information that I share with you, the best resource out there is the books written by Lee Post up in Alaska. We have 2 of the textbooks, and they've worked really well for us. And it's kind of built this interest of mine to create some classroom specimens. Right now I've been working on raccoons and different things like that. So today the focus is going to be on how do I take these bones that I've now cooked down a little bit. What do I do next? Okay. Now, unfortunately, yesterday I started cooking them, simmered them for about 4 hours, which is perfect. Should have loosened up a lot of that meat. What I should have done was yesterday when they were done, take and clean the meat off. It's easier when it's nice and warm and etc. Unfortunately, I ran out of time. I had to put the kids to bed and get some other work done. So I let them sit overnight out. Is that going to hurt them? No. Now, I made sure that they were in the garage on a table where the only thing that's getting at them is gnats, so I don't have the issue of like critters crawling away with them, because that would have been no good. Now, remember, I cooked it down. I used a little bit of Dawn dish soap to make sure that they cooked well. I unfortunately ran out of cheesecloth. I'm not going to the store because, trying to avoid social interaction with everybody. So I'm going to save this cheesecloth for step number 3, okay? Or the end of step 2, I should say. So what I do, I put it in cheesecloth, and if you didn't watch the first video on this, I did that so that I can keep certain limbs together. That way I don't have to worry about this puzzle. Essentially, I'm creating a puzzle that's 206 to 200 and however many teen bones are in certain animals. But if I can keep it to the 20-some bones that are in the one, let's see, this would be left front, then that simplifies things a little bit, right? So that's why I kept it separate. What I did, I cooked it down gently, brought it to a boil, and then let it simmer for a few hours. That makes it easy to separate these parts. I'm separating these joints, and then I'm trying to peel off all of the meat that I can, meat and cartilage, because my next step is going to involve preparing these, degreasing them, and then putting them into a whitening solution. And I'll be talking about both those steps today. I don't have the whitening solution right now. I'm going to explain where to get what I like to use. But so what I'm doing right now, I don't know if you can see this, is I'm taking and scraping off the meat of this bone, as well as the cartilage. And I've got a couple different tools that are good for this job. I really like starting with a scalpel. It will dull the blade a little bit, but it's not a big deal. I like starting with a scalpel and then working from there. Then I'll use a scraper after that, a gentle scraper, because you don't want to leave a whole bunch of blade marks on your bones. But I mean, in a very short period of time, I can have a bone that's starting to look pretty darn clean. Let's get back up to the shoulder blade, the scapula here. It's important when using a knife or a scalpel, of course, safety first always, but Yeah, I don't need to tell you that. And a lot of this meat, it just peels right off. A lot of the muscle just come off because, again, we cooked it almost like a roast. Slow roast it. Doesn't even smell that bad when you roast it. Now, if you're doing roadkill, you're going to have some different smells. But I like to use that Dawn dish soap. It has a good smell to it. I would use borax. Borax is really good for preservation and salting kind of idea. But again, I'm using what I have because of the times we're in. That's going pretty well. You can see already this scapula is pretty clean. So getting down pretty quick. What I'm going to demonstrate is one leg here. And then I'll talk about what our next step is so that you don't have to watch me for, 45 minutes or an hour doing this. The demonstration will be enough on one leg. While I'm working on this, if this was one of those live events, that'd be kind of cool. I'd get a chance to answer your questions. But I'm going to just try to think of what your questions might be. Question: come across a skeleton or a dead possum on the road. Can you do this? Yeah, certainly. This is actually really easy on dead animals. Well, it's only on dead animals, but it's easy when they're dead and already decaying a little bit. It smells more. Little Vicks Vapor Rub right on the upper lip will help with the smell a lot if you're getting into really rotten stuff. Now here's something. This is a front leg, so you got two bones in the forearm here, right? One bone up here and two down here. So this is how these two bones go together. Something I would do, and I would typically, I don't have to right now, but I would get a picture of this. Use your phone, get a bunch of pictures of how do these bones go together, what do they look like, because it's going to make it way simpler when you go to glue this back together. Because to get this nice and clean and white and degreased, I have to peel the bones apart. And knowing how that links together, because later on when I go to glue it together, I'll be like, where did this go? You can have that picture to work from. So that really helps. It's probably the most important thing you do, well, aside from preserving the bones so they don't stink, is to put them back together in the right places. I've had students in the past, and high school students are pretty awesome. They learn so much from this kind of thing. I've had kids who go, why did we learn skeletal articulation in class? I don't get it. And then years later coming back and saying, hey, that simple anatomy lesson really helped me out. And working with a scalpel, working with the tools, working with my hands, I decided to go into the medical field. It wasn't something I was interested in before, but I really liked the science side of it and the just identification, the knowledge. And so now I've got a student who's a medical technician, just doing this stuff, enjoying it. Clearly not doing exactly this, but it opened the door a little bit, opened their eyes a little bit to that. Something else to take a picture of. The wrist is one of the hardest things to put back together. There are so many different bones in the wrist. And so as I cut it apart, I've got to be really cautious on not, one, keeping them together long enough so I can get a good picture of what it looks like. Now, online, there are you can probably access some images of what the wrist bones look like and how they line up and how they're each labeled. I know that because we've done that with students and we didn't get good pictures, back before we all had cell phone cameras. But there's also the books. Lee Post has a couple books. In this case, I'm doing a gnawing a mammal, not gnawing, but doing a small mammal. I would be able to find a book that has some of those images. It's also important when you get down to the claws that you're not throwing any bones away. So double check what you're working with and make sure that what I'm pulling off here is just muscle and cartilage and not any of the bones. So, and again, if you cook it long enough and with a little soap and not too hot, like I started off at 300. Once it started boiling, I dropped it to 200 and let it sit in that Nesco for another 3 hours. And that seems to be about perfect here. I could go a little further and let it really fall apart. But again, I like to get an idea of what that wrist joint looks like. So I've got this, and I've got about 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5 bones here that made up the rest of the wrist. I'm able to identify that. Now, what I can do, after I pull the meat and cartilage off these little bones, and after I do the rest of that foot, I guess you guys can't see this here. I'm struggling to get my angle right. I've got these bones laid out here. I can put these back in my bag. I saved my little bit of cheesecloth here. This stuff will hold up just fine. I'll lay this out. I'll put my claws and my paws and my little wrist bones, which the little wrist bones sometimes will fall out of your bag when you cook and when you whiten. And that's a bit of a downside, but this isn't going to be too bad. So I've got all of my parts in there. I'll lay them out a little more linear because this bag isn't quite wide enough. I'm going to get them in here. There we go. Roll it together. All right, I lost you for a minute there. I'm hoping that this video wasn't lost altogether. We will find out, fingers crossed here. Otherwise, I might have to re-record this whole thing. What I did in the meantime, after losing you, I took, rewrapped that leg, all those parts, and I put it into my bucket here. I just got a stainless steel pan, which is fine. I'm gonna talk about what I'm doing there. Here's the next limb. I'm not going to do all this for you because you clearly have seen me do one, clean it up. So what am I adding first? I'm going to do the ammonia first. So I just bought straight ammonia. I have water in the bottom here because I'm going to dilute it a little bit. And this stuff is pretty potent and stinks and not good for you.
What is
So,
that called again, Daddy?
so I'm just going to add the ammonia down here.
Daddy, what's that called again?
I'm going to do about a, just a second. I'm going to do about a 1-to-1 mix. I know that's pretty strong, but it should clean those really well. What it does, the ammonia will pull out the grease. It'll also get down, hopefully, inside these bones because they're small enough where it'll pull out that grease from the marrow. What I find is if I'm doing larger skeletons like cattle legs or horse legs, you got to drill some 1/8-inch holes in the leg, into the long bone, because the marrow inside otherwise won't pull out. And what you'll find is after you've articulated your skeleton, you had whitened it, it all looks good. Within a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year, it's going to yellow. All that yellow marrow is just gonna leak out of there slowly and it gets greasy again. So by drilling those little holes, you can help release that. I'm gonna let this soak in ammonia solution for 2 to 5 days, depending how much time I've got. I probably won't get back to this till the weekend, early, like Monday. So it'll have 4 days or 3 days. Perfect. I'll get back to it Monday. Then what I do, and this is what I don't have right now, and I don't know that I'll have the solution in time to make another video here. But then I will pull them out of that. I'll do a water rinse where they'll sit in water for about half an hour, then I'll pull them out. They're still in the bag. I'm not going to do any other cleanup at this point because I already cleaned the bones for the most part. Same with like the skull here. I'm just going to scrape off all the muscle. I'll get it down in this ammonia and that'll take care of it. But the idea is what I'll do is then I'll put it in, so after a water rinse, I'll put it into a hydrogen peroxide mix. A hydrogen peroxide mix. Now, if you can only get drugstore hydrogen peroxide at 3%, just use it straight. You use it straight, it'll take 5, maybe a few more days to do. However, if you have a pool store close by, a non-bleach pool shock, if you read the label and its active ingredient is 27.5% or 30% or whatever it is of hydrogen peroxide. You want a hydrogen peroxide shock. That stuff works great. It's very caustic. You got to be careful. Gloves. I wear goggles when I pour it. If you get a splash up on you, that'll burn through your skin. It's really nasty stuff. But I dilute it to a 10% mix. So I'll do 2 parts water, 1 part pool shock, and then that'll whiten bones in a matter of hours to days. Like it's real quick. I've done skulls in 2-3 days of deer skulls. I've done raccoons in a day. The next day we pull them out and then we soak them in water because you don't want to touch them. I use a special tongs that I have for this. I'll soak them in water for 30 minutes, then rinse them in a sink and then get them back onto the table. Because if you handle them right away, you're gonna burn your thumbs and your fingers and your skin. So being careful there is really valuable. If you saw the first video, you saw that I did the rib cage in 1 bag. This is going to I got to get all that meat and muscle off between these vertebrae, and I've got to separate them. Then I'll get them back in this bag. So I'm going to separate all those. I am going to get a picture of it after I pull some of this meat off before separating the vertebrae, because that's going to make it easier to reassemble. Okay. You could, at this point, if I'm doing this, I could take these pairs of ribs and break it into 4 sections, break it into each pair, and lay them all out in order in a bag. If I had more cheesecloth, that would make it really easy to assemble, because then when you pull them out, it's like, okay, they all line up. I know what they are. The downside, if I don't, is you really have to figure out which ribs pair up together. And that takes a little longer and a little bit more work then. Okay. So again, it's going in ammonia. Ammonia is going to degrease. Rinse into hydrogen peroxide solution. I really like a 10% because it works fast. Don't go full 30%. It's just not necessary, and you might as well save some. And then pull it out of there, rinse again, and you reassemble. And that reassembly is part 3. That should be, I'm hoping next week, Wednesday or so, I'll be able to get the reassembly video up. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this video worked without too much interruption when I lost connection. And I will catch you on the flip side.